Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Beyond Deadlines podcast, where we tackle challenges that planning and schedule leaders come across on a day-to-day basis. My name is Micah Pipo, and I'm a planning manager for Intel.
And my name is Greg Lawton. I'm the CEO of an AI schedule management company called Nodes and Links.
Each podcast is designed to give you strategies and tactics that you can implement right away. Today's episode, Greg's on the hot seat. Greg, you've been asked to be the VP of Planning and Scheduling at a top consultancy. Traditionally, the company has provided people, but with constraints on planning and scheduling talent, she wants you to figure out ways to do more with less. The CEO has tasked you specifically with creating a productized strategy for clients. And in an extra twist this episode, if Greg mentions Nodes and Links, he's going to have to donate $1,000 to charity for every time he mentions it. Greg, are you ready to begin?
Yes, okay, let's go. Cool, okay, right. So what in your mind is a productized strategy?
To answer that question, we probably need to define what a non-productized strategy is first. A non-productized strategy is a person in a seat. We have a construction job, we're building a data center, we need a scheduler to go help with that data center. I hire a consultancy, they bring me scheduler, that scheduler builds the schedule, implements the progress, creates the reports.
Mm-hmm.
It's a person, the person leaves, no more service.
Beautiful, okay. So the productized strategy is the opposite of that, which is you're specifically bundling together a repeatable and scalable offering that can be productized. Okay.
Yeah.
And I can see that the constraint is scheduling talent. What is the business model of this consultancy? Are we bums on seats? Are we fixed price? Are we segmented on specific verticals? Or is it kind of I just provide you with people and they do whatever you want them to?
Let's just go with the latter. Bums on seats. They're spread across the construction industry. And traditionally, they focus on, I find people, I get you people.
Cool, okay. And final question. What's the kind of main driver for this? Because if there's constraints on scheduling talent, that means that either we're hemorrhaging people and we can't keep up with the contracts we've got, or we just can't find good people, so our growth is really limited, and this is a growth play. Which one of those two is it?
This is a growth play. The job market right now, there's plenty of openings, plenty of opportunity to go land positions, fill people in seats, start earning some fee, and we're missing out because we can't find people.
Got it, okay. Right, so then looking at this, I'm thinking, right, so what I'm hearing is we're just a traditional bums on seats consultancy model that will basically put our people out to do anything that a client asks. I'll be very political with my language there. And we get paid for that. Now, we're thinking we could grow a lot faster, probably because there's a lot more demand that we can access, but there's not enough supply of good people. And we're saying here, how can we move delivery away from people? The kind of natural implication of that is, can we start productizing some of the services that we're providing and execute them in a different way? Is that correct?
Sounds right. And don't forget the challenge. I'm going to hold you to it.
I won't mention the name of our company that I know very well.
If your palms weren't sweaty. The best part is I can say Nodes and Links all I want. You can't. I'm going to bait you into this one by the end of the episode.
Not happening. Okay, right. So I'm actually going to step back a second and actually just critique productized first. Because if the task is generate and allow us to access the extra revenue that we could generate by executing the operation in different ways. Look, there's 4 ways that you can scale an operation. You scale it through people, money, eyeballs, or software. Those are the 4 essentially scale technologies that humans have. People obviously is the bums on seats, just hire more people and we can do that. Money is traditionally associated with finance and venture capital. So it's, if I can buy 100 million of real estate, with $1 billion, I can buy 10 times more, which means I get 10 times more return. And then the last two is you've got eyeballs, which is actually about lead generation. So you think here at the fact that The Rock generated whatever he generated in his entire career at the cinema, and then he starts a tequila company, and that tequila company is worth 10 times more than he's ever generated in his entire life within a year because he can attract eyeballs. And the fourth then is software. So of those, we've got options which are we can just find other consultants and kind of subcontract. We can find technology, software technology that can do jobs for us. We can look at different classifications of people, so get less skilled people or outsourcing, which is the whole outsourcing movement to the West. Eyeballs, I don't think is a thing here because we're already looking at we've got more demand than we can supply. Just to clarify, do I have access to go to other consultancies and to try and essentially just get a finder's fee for finding them work and badge them under our label? Or am I limited here, hence pushing me towards productized?
Let's say the CEO came up as a planner and scheduler, and she realizes that there's a massive opportunity here to productize. And
Got it.
the service that this consultancy offers is really good. And she doesn't want to go down the sub-consultancy route because it dilutes the brand potentially, because now you're handing over your identity to somebody else, which puts you at risk. And she really thinks that the biggest opportunity is to figure out a way to offer better service to customers, but at the same time, reduce the hours that are involved, reduce the amount of people that are involved.
Beautiful. Okay. So this is where we need to take a sidestep for a second into a wonderful subject called operations management, which is part of an MBA. I'll try and make it not boring.
You want to bet on that one too?
No. People think that things lie on a spectrum. So on one end of the spectrum, you've got completely bespoke services. So when you're going to a private tailor that literally cuts the cloth from your suit from a line of cloth and makes it, all the way to the other end where you're just buying off the peg and it's mass produced. But there's actually something slightly off on that axis, which is what Nike and the other shoe companies do amazingly well, which is mass customized. So you can have only a specific number of shoe designs, but the number of colors and the number of kind of small changes you can make almost makes it that you have infinite shoes that you can play with. I think any experienced scheduler listening to this will know that a vast majority of the monthly activities that we do can be productized. They only require bespokeness because some individuals have preferences for some different tweaks. So, for example, I was having a conversation on Friday around measuring momentum in projects. Well, some people like to use throat burn down. Some people like to use SPI. It doesn't really matter. You're all kind of measuring the same thing. Is this project going at the pace that I think it's going at? That kind of thing. Now, productizing is essentially taking the McDonald's method to this, which is, let's imagine there's a certain market size, and let's imagine that 80% of that market could be served with 20% of the solutions. And the last 20% requires the 80% because they're super, super bespoke. What you're telling me here is let's target 80% and develop the absolute world's best product, which is only the 20%, which is essentially you could take it as the McDonald's, but it's also the Michelin star. If you go to a Michelin star restaurant, there is a menu. That's all you're getting. They're not changing the menu for you. You're getting the 11 courses that they've designed. Why? Because they can increase the quality and the precision by which they create and replicate that menu compared to completely random. Okay, so with
Yeah.
that,
Well, I think, and I had a thought here. I'm going to cut you off midstream, but this strategy also works really well if you are an individual planner, scheduler on a job site as well. If you go sit down with a project manager or project director and say, what do you want? You're going to open yourself up to bespokeness, to give me, at this job, I had this, that, and this, and the other. A really great strategy when you go to sit down to someone is to craft that menu of items that you know is super operationally efficient, where you can create
Mhm.
those reports already and you can churn them out and then try and limit the changes and tweaks that the project manager or directors are going to have. And then the final piece of that is to then batch all of those together to understand. So that way you don't create like 10 different reports. Maybe you just create one and there's only one, two little flares that you have to pop in there. And those just came to my mind. I think it'd be helpful for schedulers to take out of this, in that sort of, I'm going to operationalize and smooth out what I'm doing. Sorry, continue.
So now let's think about the range of services that I'm going to assume that because you said we provide any service, I've got an entire range to select from. So based on that, let's think about this. Creating schedule policy, definitely scalable and definitely productizable.
Schedule policy, you're talking contracts, specifications, processes, or
Yes,
what's policy?
processes for how schedule management is going to be executed. Your SMP schedule management plan,
Yeah,
these
okay.
kinds of things, like the formal process documentation. Creating a schedule from a series of contractual requirements and build strategies, holistically very bespoke. That's why that's why some people get paid the big bucks and others don't in a large sense. It's that creation element. Writing bidding documentation. There's a repeatability to it, but there's specialist bidding firms that go cut across. It's not just schedule management. Then we get into the monthly cycle reports. 99.9% automatable, to the fact that there's an entire billion-dollar industry of consultants who have tried to do it with Power BI. And I think everyone here can smile with how successful that's been. But reports. Reports also lead into change management because you'll have change management policy and change management report. So schedule change impact. Then you'll have your commissioning and handover, etc. Not really applicable in schedule land, but again, that's more building schedule, etc. And then you'll have your closeout documentation. What we're wanting here is to develop a proposition that forms repeatable business where over-serving clients leads them to spend greater money with our consultancy in the future. What we're seeing there is policy, which is generally a one-off, closeouts, which are generally a one-off, and ongoing reports, be it the cycle or change, which need to be done all the time. So what I'd look to do is I'd look to productize reports.
You forgot one in there. You forgot schedule progressing.
Oh, sorry, that's the monthly cycle. That's the monthly cycle to me.
Gotcha.
Oh, no, wait a minute. Are you talking about updating schedules?
Yeah.
No, I did
Yeah.
totally forget one. I did, yeah. There is an updating schedule. That can be productized, though it's more difficult than a report, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a whole nother episode.
Yeah, we'll have to do another episode on that because that depends on, well, has someone written down what 50% of this activity is and how are we going to measure it and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd be looking to do something with reports. Now, we live in the age of GPT, so there are opportunities.
What's that?
Oh, GPT is a technology which is a subset
Ball
of.
on your leg. If you don't know what ChatGPT is at this point,
Like,
go
oh
on
my
to
God.
Google. Go into Google. We're not going to explain it for you.
No. It's large language models, AI that can do human stuff.
All right, move along.
Cool. Now, well, if we're trying to automate elements of reports, then we have to find reports that we can sell for X and create for X divided by 10. So 10 times less. That either means we need simple reports that we can just get cheap labor somewhere else in the world to do, but then we're a very high-end consultancy and actually explaining different concepts might be difficult. Or you use technology, which is of the 4 scale frameworks. That's why you use software. It's a scale technology. We live in the age of AI and GPT. Question, can I use my customers' data with open GPT models?
It's a mixed bag. You're gonna in the real world, you're gonna have some customers who are privately held. Yeah, sure, go ahead. And then you're gonna have others that are associated with the government or companies that don't want their data there. So let's say it's a mixed bag.
Cool. Then I'm going to make a big assumption here that either we can just target customers who don't care about sharing their information publicly that other people can use GPT to search, or we've got the resources and money to spend a couple of million developing our own private large language models and tailoring for the job we've got to do. I'm just going to snap my finger and say we have that tech.
Boom, done.
There we go. And then essentially we're left with the end result, which is there'll be a series of reports that are standardized, and I would assume there'll be basic reports like update reports or schedule health, and there'll be much more advanced reports like predictability analysis and acceleration analysis and delay analysis. And the perfect place to get to would just be where they're literally a menu item and with a fixed cost. And it's about just pumping through volume whilst maintaining a super high level of output. And the balance for this would be is that these reports would have to be at least half as expensive as the everything else in the market and twice as good. So it's kind of like, why would anybody go to another consultancy to get any of these? Because you're going to be waiting 4 times as long. They're going to cost twice as much, and they're just not going to be as good.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. To me, I kind of want to circle back to the creation, though. I think the reporting one makes sense. If you had to create a productized schedule creation, in my mind, you could, because you could offer a team that's all they did. And it would be one of those not fully automated, but with human, it's like the Tesla factory example. I remember watching some video where they tried to fully automate the factory, and they found this one thing that people could simply just do better. Is like grabbing this hose and connecting it, and they just couldn't get a robot to do it, and a person just grabbed it and stuck it in. Like, why did we don't need to spend gazillion dollars to automate that. A human can do it. To me, productizing creation falls in that bucket. I think you could probably create a very high-end service for it with a team that's all they did, plus they're using automation and technology to help them out along. When I look at the market and talk to people, people feel that sometimes you create a schedule, you need to own it all the way through. But I don't know if that's true. Maybe you just need a team that's all they do is create these schedules and pass them on to teams.
So I really like that idea. Like, the challenge was to create a consultancy here, so we just honed in on a singular thing, but kind of zooming right out. In a free market economy, the market will decide what it wants. Now, either productized services have been offered to the market and the market didn't want them, or they've been offered and they just weren't executed well, or they've just simply never been offered. And I don't know what the answer of that is, but in my mind, it makes perfect sense that you could actually make a very, very successful niche consulting outfit specializing in each of the individual elements. Like, we already see this now. Like, companies like HKA only specialize in things like delay claim analysis.
Yeah.
And do you know what? They don't bid. If you go to them, hey, I'd love for you to bid for some work. No, I'm not bidding. No. But like, if you If you need us, you'll know you'll need us and you'll call us because you know that we're the best at what we do. End. End
Yeah.
of. Um, and I feel that, could the world get to that point with, for example, data center scheduling? Could you imagine 5 schedulers across the world who are all they did was schedule data center builds? Yeah. And I reckon they'd be, just the learning lessons, you'd end up getting to a pinnacle. Now, obviously, the question there is the work voluminous enough, and um, is the pay good enough, etc. All of these kind of questions. But I actually think at almost all points along the schedule management process, you could actually productize a huge amount of them. Think about it as well. Even the really high end services like risk management, where you're running Monte Carlo simulations, they are productized.
Yeah.
You will go to a consultant and hire a specialist risk consultant like Charlotte, who we had on a couple of episodes ago. You will fly her in to specifically run all of the workshops and find out all the information. So to some extent, that is almost productized.
Yeah, one thing we didn't touch on is simply just the contract in which you sign companies up to. That to me is where the productization really starts to
Mm-hmm.
shift. If you're in a model where you're signing contracts and you're bringing on people and it's staff aug, that isn't going to ever be a product.
No.
And then that carries a mentality with it where you bring someone in and then you pay to train them. They're there and you have to coach them and educate them, and it's not a product. And so I think if you're looking to transition to that model, you have to start with, as an owner, you have to start with, I want products. This is the contract I'm going to sign up for products. This is the culture I'm going to establish for products. I'm only going to accept products. If you bring in people and services and they have to be ingrained into my system, it's never going to work.
I think if you take this argument to its most extreme, like imagine a client organization that just says, I'm not interested in services, as in bumps on, I'm only interested in products. I want to buy a schedule management policy, and I want to buy a commercial management and a project management policy, and I want someone to build me the best schedule, etc. Now, you would have to have people in that organization who know what good looks like. But arguably, I just think that's a very interesting position to be in, because you can do essentially what Apple do. So, for example, Apple, everyone thinks that they outsource all of their um, parts and manufacturing to Foxconn. They don't. Foxconn's the biggest one. They actually have hundreds of suppliers, and Apple's strategy is to have the most complex supply chain possible. They don't want a simple supply chain. They want complexity because they want optionality. So they will actually say to people, oh, we need to up chip production by 10%. Fair game, rule, no one can have more than 2%. I want as many people as possible, because do you know what? If someone messes up, it doesn't make that bigger impact to my launch. And this is for an organization that has to hold a launch date. Like, have you ever seen an iPhone launch late?
No, can't now. Never.
Exactly. So it's almost like, just taking the extreme example, and I've got really very little evidence to back this comment up, but it's almost like the simpler the supply chain, the more high-end risk you're taking, because the less competition you have after the initial competition period, it makes sense that projects would go later or balloon out. Whereas if you look at something like, I know it's a different thing, but like Apple or Samsung, you've never seen a product launch late with them, and their strategy is as big a complexity as possible and productized.
Yeah, there's probably a lot going on in between, but that thought you brought up of simple supply chain versus complex supply chain, as an owner, if you have a simple supply chain, you shove more stuff down on the supply chain and you create less. And to me, it's if you're just hiring someone for a role. If I'm hiring 100 schedulers versus one scheduler, I'm like, oh, you can just come sit next to me. He'll see what I do. We'll go
Mm-hmm.
about our merry lives and he'll just copy what I do. If you're hiring 100 schedulers, you can't do that. Now you're starting to look at, how do I operationalize things? How do I turn things into what we're calling products? Because I need to now do that across 100 different people. And to me, that's where simple versus complex supply chain, how you look at it and what you want to set up, people gravitate towards something that's simple. Can I just bring in a top consultant and they provide me people and seats? But that's actually going to take more of your time and probably provide less value to you than if you do more work. You basically push 90% of the work onto the consultant, and then you're doing 10% of the work if you're doing butts and seats. Bums, as you say, bums and seats. Now, on the flip side, if you do a productized, yes, up front, you're going to do 90% of that work yourself, building the products as an owner to kind of say, this is what I want. I'm going to price you out for this. But then over the long term, they do 10% of the work, but then that work grows up and up and up and up in value. So you make that initial investment to set up the products, and then you get to sit back and enjoy the fruits of your labor. And I think that it increases competition because you can take that product and go out to anyone and say, listen, this is my schedule report. How much can you do it for? What other value do you bring to the table?
See, that is very, very interesting to me. And I would imagine there's a lot of people listening to this will say, yes, but insert lots of reasons why things can't be productized. And you know what? That is exactly why venture capital wants to come into this space, because the question they ask themselves is, what would I need to believe for the world to be fundamentally different? If the core tasks that you do can be productized, then they can be scaled, then you get massive scale effects and advantages, and which means that you can start to consolidate. So if you think about internet search, 80-90% of all Western internet search goes through Google. And there's this tiny slither that goes to the high-end companies. And you know what? If you want bespokeness, cool, but you buy it after you've bought Google. You buy all of Google's services first, and then you tweak it at the end. You don't another example is, how many people today build a car from scratch? You don't. You go and buy a car and then you modify it.
It's funny. I was like, my dad does. There's one person.
But it is. But that is a passion project, not a scale. So do you know what? Someone can build that car from scratch. It'll cost them $250,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
But 100 billion of revenue per year is done by people doing scale. So it's this kind of shift, and I would actually say it's just on my mind. I think with technology that fundamentally automates human thought to an extent, we're now at an age where we can really ask ourselves the questions, not should we productize, but it's almost what do we do when the world productizes.
Yeah.
Because it'll be like, well, which bit, you've only got two questions to ask. One, which bit will I productize, which is your part, as in, I will create schedules for data centers. I will do claims analysis because my name's HK or Hill. How will I take what's productized and tweak it on that so it is mass customization? So I add a couple more slides, or I add some different KPIs, or I do something different that justifies the additional expense I'm going to put on that product. So for example, if you can do an entire schedule progress update report for $900, like for $1 billion project, you coming in and tweaking that report is going to cost more than $900. So you're going to more than double the price for some tweaks. And let's be honest, it's going to be like 10 or 20 grand per month to do some proper tweaks. So you're talking 10 to 20 times the cost of the original base thing. Better be some good tweaks.
Oh, well, Bill loves to see it in light green instead of dark green. So you better get Bill his light green. All right, Greg, we could probably go on for hours on this topic, but we are at time. Any final thoughts?
Number one, I haven't said the words the entire episode.
That the audience knows about. We cut probably about 10 times where he said notes and links. So
what I'd probably say is we joked around with productized services. It's here. It's here, and all of the repetitive tasks that that we've spent the last 2-3 decades personally doing, within the next year, maybe 2 years, will all become productized services by tech companies. And what I'd say is either you're probably gonna get approached by these tech companies who can offer it at a fifth of the cost of what you're paying now, or you're going to have to react and figure out where you're going to fit in this world, because someone will need some bespokeness.
Yeah.
But one thing that's guaranteed is the world ain't the same anymore, and
No.
I'm sorry to tell people that that's the case, and it's changed.
The one thing I would add before we take off is, if you're just a planner or scheduler coming up in your career, start thinking about how you do planning and scheduling in terms of workflows and these productizations, because that's how you're going to elevate your career and be able to more easily transition with these new technologies. You're not thinking about all the 48 different button clicks you need to do in P6 and how you get it into Power BI. You're thinking, this is a task. How do I go from A to B as fast as possible and as efficient as possible? And that sort of framework's really going to help you out later in life. All right, folks,
No.
we are, this is going to cost you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, of course, if people would like some generative AI, they can Google the name of a company that I cannot possibly say.
I'll say it for you. Nodes and links, folks. Give it a shot. I think it was free to try?
Yeah, it's totally free.
Free to try. It's the best product out on the market right now to start jumping into some of this generative AI productization and schedule review. With that, though, we are done. Another thing you can check out is we have a LinkedIn newsletter, we have an email newsletter, and we've also launched a YouTube channel. Head on out there if you're looking for tips and tricks to advance your career, tips and tricks in scheduling, anything in between. Great resources, all for free. We put all of our content out there for free because we believe the world needs more planners and schedulers. All right, folks, until next week, this is Greg and Micah from Beyond Deadlines. Hope you enjoyed the show.